Today, in Draw My Life, the scariest Cartoon Network's lost episodes. Once again, the series that accompanied us in our childhood shows that they hide much more than it seems. So today, we're bringing you 3 lost episodes of one of the most obscure channels on TV, Cartoon Network. Dexters Laboratory is one of the most legendary shows of our childhood. Being one of the first Cartoon Network series, it quickly became the real deal. Let's face it, everyone loves the little genius Dexter. I mean, look at that cutie. Unfortunately, what few know is that in 1997, what seemed to be a draft of the episode Figure Not Included from the second season was leaked. I was one of the lucky ones who watched the broadcast. Well, lucky is not the right word. Anyway, I'll tell you everything that happened in that strange episode. In the first scene, the 3 members of the Major Glory gang were playing and having fun with the Major Glory action figure. While they were laughing, little Dexter showed up wanting to join the gang and play with them. But not so fast. To join them, he had to have a Major Glory figure. Dexter proudly pulled out his version of the Major Glory doll, cut out of a cereal box. The other 3 laughed their heads off and mocked him, bragging about their figures. Dexter then returned home, sad and disappointed. He ran into his mother in the kitchen and politely asked her for money. The mom quickly agrees to give it as his birthday present. It looked like Dexter won't have his action figure for quite a while. Dexter, depressed, goes to his lab and his annoying sister Eddy shows up and makes fun of his cardboard doll. She then runs off dancing and laughing, making fun of her brother because he's incapable of making a decent action figure on his own. That's when Dexter comes up with the idea of making himself a Major Glory with real powers. Dexter grabbed some tools, designed a machine capable of creating the ultimate action figure, and got to business. Meanwhile, Eddy was jumping and dancing while humming to a song. She accidentally pressed on a button on the dashboard, which turned on the ray his brother was working on. Thus, the machine got switched on and electrocuted his brother with the gamma rays. Dexter began to scream as the radioactive waves burned his skin. His limbs twisted and his bones grew widely until his screams of pain ceased. A black cloud of smoke rose and a loud bang was heard. Eddy screamed in fear at the sight of the atrocity her brother had mutated into. She reached the smoke, but all she found was a huge hole in the wall. In the next scene, the 3 Major Glory Gang kids were playing in the park with their action figures. One of them mentioned that it was already dark and it was time to go home. The other 2 mocked him, calling him a wuss. Suddenly, they were silenced as they felt a strong, icy breeze blow past. They heard the branches of a tree move. From a bush, a huge shadow emerged. What I saw that day is an image I still can't erase from my mind. Dexter came out of a cloud of smoke and wasn't that adorable little genius he has always been. His teeth were small and gaped. His skin was black and blistered from the burns. His limbs stuck out from his body and his eyes were huge. It had mutated into some sort of Major Glory monster. You can imagine how traumatic it was to see my favorite character turned into something so hideous. The other 3 children screamed in terror and froze as this abomination ran to them. Dexter asked them ironically, "Now I've become Major Glory. Can I be part of the gang?" The tallest of the children knelt and begged Dexter for forgiveness. Dexter laughed and grabbed him with one hand. He growled at him, ripped his legs off, and left him bleeding on the floor. The rest of the group ran for their lives, and Dexter ran after them. One hid behind a bush and seemed to have outsmarted the beast. A few seconds passed and there was absolute silence, only the gasping of the child. Suddenly, a boy's cries could be heard in the distance, and boom! Blood splashed onto the screen, and the screen completely turned to red. For a few seconds, the dead child's face appeared. The episode went back to normal, and I saw the 3rd boy still running, not looking back. He made it to the nearest house and knocked on the door desperately, hoping someone was inside. A few seconds passed and no one seemed to show any signs of life. Heavy footsteps began to be heard as they came louder and louder. The boy continued knocking on the door like crazy. The footsteps were getting closer and closer. Dexter came to the house and walked up to the boy. His mouth was dripping with blood. "What do you think you're doing, you coward?" The boy began to cry and kept knocking on the door. Dexter grabbed him by the head and started slamming him against the door until... the image was so disturbing, I'd rather not go into details. After the bloody scene, Eddy opened the door and looked speechless. Dexter stared at her and got filled with rage. "You!" Dexter growled and reached out to her. But right on that time, Mandark appeared riding a huge steel machine. "Don't you dare to touch her!" Dexter gets even more annoyed and throws a punch in his face. Mandark managed to dodge it and asked him to calm down. But then Dexter yelled at him. "Don't tell me to calm down!" He threw another punch, and this time he successfully hit him in the face. Mandark rose from the blow and fell to the ground. From the floor, he pulled Dexter's leg and fell. Quickly, Mandark jumped on top of him and started punching him with all his might. Blood began to splatter, and Dexter's screams could be heard. After a couple of punches, Dexter began to enjoy the pain and smiled. Mandark was taken aback. Dexter seized the moment to dive in, grabbed Mandark by the head with both hands, and started squeezing it hard. Mandark began to scream, and there was a crunching sound. Eddy intervened just in time and begged her brother to stop. Dexter, consumed with anger, looked at her sister and took mercy on her. He dropped Mandark to the ground and came close to her. Eddy, crying, told him that this one he would never do. Dexter became smaller and began to transform to his regular size. After all, the experiment was wearing off. Dexter was as he has always been. Eddy went and hugged her brother. It's all right, she told her little brother. Dexter, trying to deal with what he had done, cried and apologized to his sister. Suddenly, Mandark's mechanical robot foot appeared and crushed Dexter. Blood splattered on Eddy's face and screams, "No! What have you done?" Mandark looked at her and said, "Sooner or later he was going to hurt you. I did it for you." Eddy yelled at him to leave and that she wanted nothing to do with him. The screen stuck on the scene like a broken record until it turned black after a few seconds. I promise you that I've searched everywhere for this episode, but I have never been able to find it. The only thing that I found is that in the same year, one of the creative directors of Cartoon Network was fired. Apparently, he was kicked out because of creative differences with the executives. Since it's such an old cartoon, I guess this episode will soon be history. Even though no one believes me, every time I tell the story, I still have vivid flashbacks. So I'm trying to find someone who also has watched the airing. For those of you who haven't and somehow came across this episode, I warn you not to watch it. It all began when Robin called the Titans for a meeting. Everyone showed up except Beast Boy. Robin and the other Titans went looking for him in his room. After knocking on the door several times, no one answered, so they walked in without permission. The rest of the Titans were horrified by the bloody scene. It even made Cyborg throw up. Beast Boy was sleeping around, how shall I put it, the remains of humans. They woke him up to ask him what had happened, but Beast Boy turned into a gorilla, pupils dilated and all, and attacked Robin. With everyone's help, Beast Boy had no choice but to escape from the tower. Robin couldn't possibly process what had happened. What he had feared for so long was finally happening. Beast Boy has fallen under the animal instincts. The Titans gathered in the room to plan what they would do next. They saw Beast Boy on the news attacking people on the city, so they immediately got down to work and came up with a plan. Attack him, sedate him, and take him to the tower to operate on his brain. At that moment, the crime alarm rang. The villains were striking at the other end of the city. Starfire and Raven went to stop them, while Robin and Cyborg went to the city to set their plan in motion. Robin begged him to stop, but he ignored him and attacked him instead. Cyborg didn't want to hurt his friend, and Robin couldn't handle the beast alone. Luckily for Robin, Beast Boy escaped into the forest, and Robin and Cyborg chased after him. Beast sneaked behind a bush to attack Robin by surprise. He transformed himself into a white shark and ripped him apart. Cyber was in shock watching his friend being devoured like that, so he ran off to alarm the other Titans about it. They all went to the forest looking for Beast Boy. They walked stealthily so they could go unnoticed, but they bumped into Robin's decapitated head. When Starfire looked at him, she became so angry that she fell under her planet's warrior instincts. She attacked Beast Boy with all her might, but he dodged her attacks. Starfire lost control of herself and started attacking the city. Raven went to stop her while Cyborg tried to stop Beast Boy. Raven opened a portal to another dimension to lock her up, but Starfire locked her up instead. Meanwhile, Cyborg and Beast Boy battled each other. Cyborg refused to hurt his friend at all costs, so Beast took advantage of the situation, turned into a bear, and attacked him. Some children walked nearby and Beast went over there to attack them. Cyber plucked up his courage and tackled his friend to save the children from the angry Beast. He beat him to death. A few minutes passed and Cyber cried inconsolably for his best friend, but the city was still under attack. Raven was locked in another dimension and Star was out of her mind. Cyber didn't have the strength to stop her. Fortunately, other heroes came to the rescue. The only way to put an end to her was to kill her. As much as it pained everyone, they had no other choice, and that's how Cyborg became the last Titan. That all the characters in the Cartoon Network series died and our souls wandering in Purgatory. For those of you who don't know, Purgatory is the phase before heaven, and that's where those who have a few things to improve stay. Remember Dante's Hell? Yes, the one in the Divine Comedy. Well, he also wrote about the Purgatory, but we'll leave that explanation for another video. I mean, it's no wonder why these children are stuck in the Purgatory, right? It all starts in the neighborhood. This place did exist in real life, in earthly life, so to speak. The characters live and die there, but in different times. However, when it was their time, they all passed into a parallel dimension of the neighborhood. That is, to the neighborhood in the Purgatory. And this is what we see in the series. Do you follow me? They don't remember much of their past, so they don't talk about their lives before they died. But don't worry, because we're going to tell you. Rolf was the first to reach the Purgatory. That is, he was the first to live and die in the neighborhood. He was born in a distant place, but since his father was a shepherd, he traveled with him to help in the cattle raising business. They came to the land that would later become the neighborhood. There, they built a farm which they filled with animals. Rolf was helping his father in the fields until one day, while he was herding the animals, a bull ran wild and began to kill the rest of the cattle. Rolf tried in vain to stop him, but the bull's horn pierced Rolf's body. He arrived at Purgatory in 1903, along with the rest of the animals the bull had killed. This is why we aren't surprised by Rolf's hardworking attitude throughout the series. Next to appear in Purgatory was Johnny. He moved with his parents to live in Rolf's farm. Since there was no other children there, he isolated himself by creating an imaginary friend named Plank, with whom he lived great adventures. Unfortunately, little Johnny died in 1922 after a long struggle with tuberculosis. He took Plank with him to the neighborhood in Purgatory, and he also became close friends with Rolf. Eddy arrived years later. He was born in New York, but due to the Great Depression in 1932, he moved with his family to the neighborhood. The place wasn't yet as we currently know it, but it had evolved a lot from Rolf's farm. New families had come to live there, and Rolf's parents' land had been divided to build new houses. Eddy's personality in life was that of a trickster, but in this case, for a good cause, his family. He was willing to do anything for them. Unfortunately, he lost this positive side when he got to Purgatory. He died in 1939 after his plan failed. He drowned trying to cross the river while escaping from some children he had tricked. Sarah and Ed arrived in the neighborhood a few years after Eddy's death. In the late 1940s, the place had been changing. It had a suburban feel now. The two brothers moved in with their mother since their father had died in war. Their mother worked hard to support the family. As a result, Sarah felt very responsible for Ed when her mother wasn't home. This gradually gave her an angry and controlling nature. She wouldn't let poor Ed alone. who on the other hand was very kind and quiet, although not very intelligent. The absence of his father gave him the extreme resilience he possesses in the series. He took advantage of his free time to read the comics that came after the war. Unfortunately, Ed and Sarah died in 1953 in a car accident when their mother was taking them to visit their grandparents. Neither their manners nor their relationship changed in Purgatory. Once in the 60s, fun-loving Nas came to live in the neighborhood with her parents. They were a typical hippie family of the time. They claimed Nas was a flower child. She loved to play and talk to people, a free spirit, if you will. However, in 1979, she died in a terrible way. One night, while she was sleeping, a killer snuck into her house. He crept into Nas' bedroom, tortured her, and then killed her. Her parents suffered the same fate. When she arrived in Purgatory, because her death had caused her so much trauma, she put aside the memory of her parents. This is why we see that she has so much free time to go out and have fun without a curfew. Almost 10 years later came Ed. Ed was son of two very bright but very cold-hearted scientists. Even though they mostly cared about their work and prizes, they were controlling of little Ed. They forced him to study for long hours and punished him if he didn't meet his goals. They succeeded in making Ed the best in his class. However, he became a shy and weak kid. It was science that killed him. In 1986, he was working on an experiment when a gas leak mixed with a fire torch, causing a huge explosion. The house blew up and Ed and his parents were killed instantly. The bad news for Ed was that even in Purgatory, he was still controlled by his parents. Kevin was born the day Ed died. Perhaps this is why they're such opposites. Kevin's home couldn't even be called a home. Nobody paid attention to him, and this is why he developed such a cynical and cruel character. Because he was abused at home, he took to bullying other children, and on a winter day in 1999, the problems at home escalated, causing his death. His father came home angry after a long day of work. He started drinking and slowly got drunk. When he ran into Kevin in the hall, he beat him up so badly that he knocked him unconscious. The kid died on his way to the hospital. His father spent the rest of his life in prison. Kevin's character doesn't change much in Purgatory. He's still the same bully who causes trouble, you know? However, his father is different. Although he's still very distant, in this case, at least, he showers Kevin with gifts. The last to arrive was Jimmy. He moved with his family into the house where Kevin had lived. He was diagnosed with leukemia at a very young age, and due to this, his parents were very overprotective of him and encouraged him to never leave the house. This attitude turned him into an awkward kid who found it difficult to relate to other children. He spent the last months of his life bedridden until he died in the early 2000s. The most curious thing about this legend is that the cruel sisters never lived in the earthly neighborhood. It's said that they were the daughters of demons. Some say that they come from Scooby, those women of medieval tradition who seduce teenagers by entering their dreams. Does this fit with the series? Maybe more than seducing. They're dedicated to tormenting the boys in Purgatory, right? The thing is that they seem to possess special abilities, such as appearing instantly anywhere. At the same time, they also have a surprising attraction to the Eds. In short, everyone hates them and some fear them. Before finishing, we leave you with this image that circulates on the internet that represents very well the times in which each one of the protagonists lived and died. Isn't it curious? What do you think about this theory of Ed, and Eddy? Is it credible? Everything that I've told you is supported by the fact that the parents hardly appeared in the neighborhood, as if it were a parallel reality where there are no adults. Plus, their previous life and their deaths fit very well with the way they're portrayed in the series. But what fits the most is the green-purple color of their tongues, which is the color of people when they die. Casualty? I think not. So, which one is your favorite? Would you like to see more videos like this? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for your support, and we hope to see you soon.